So as a cosplayer, I do 90% original designs, which sounds really weird, but it's also something that I love to do, is my takes on characters. And, well, that hasn't changed. I think most of my work for the next few months are just on originals, including Senator Anakin, new Thranduil stuff, and even Elf Loki. But today, I'm a giant nerd. I wanted to try a book design, and my friend and I, after a cosplay contest, were like, what if we did this? So I designed a Paul Atreides. Paul Atreides. And this is Paul Atreides. It's more like Paul Muad'Dib. It was like Emperor Paul Muad'Dib, like fancy Paul, basically. Because I like Dune, and Dune Part 2 comes out next year, very soon-ish. It's like 11 months. But I wanted to talk about the design, and I wanted to show the fabrics, because I like fabrics. And I did a little bit of work already on this, because I ran out of some stuff, so I'll show you the work that I've already done before my brain decides to give up on it and say it's not worth filming. So the first thing I did was make a leotard. Now, I use this weird, like, Ponte knit, and I had to do double layers of everything so I could do a bunch of cording. I'm never going to use this knit again. It is the thickest, most annoying thing to get through, and I had, like, 4 layers of it going through. So, this is a leotard. It is actually a functional leotard with, like, a zipper in the back, and yeah, you'll notice that I gave up and I used other types of linings, so also you'll notice the lining isn't, like, great. The only reason that I have said lining is so I can do the cording channels. Because on this leotard, there are there's like 90 cording channels, or 120, something along those lines, because there's also all these on top. This is silk, so you'll notice the silk. I'll show you in a second. But yeah, so it basically covers the outline of the armor, and mostly I did a lot of work for an armor that I'm actually not going to be using now, because the fabric that I got for armor is absolutely gorgeous. And I want more of it on my costume than what I have, because I fell in love with it. But the armor will probably cover, so this is what's going to be shown. And if you don't know, when I made my still suit back in last year, I used cording instead of tubing, or instead of like foam dowels for tubing, because I really wanted something flexible, because this stuff, it moves. Because one of the things about my still suit is that I can't sit down in it, and I said no. If I'm gonna make a fancy still suit, I'm gonna be able to sit down in it. So I'll show you my solutions for that too. Done so far. This took probably about 4 days while I was waiting for things to arrive. But now I have to get back into other stuff, like lace fronting some wigs and like ventilating wigs and doing all that stuff. So I'll get back to this probably after that, probably in like mid-March. But also I have another thing that I have to turn in April, so maybe this will be for the summer. Sorry. Fabrics. Let's talk some fabrics. So, the fabrics that I use are supremely fancy. The first thing is for the armor. When Silk Baron put out their embroidered silks this year for Christmas, for their like 12 days Christmas thing, I bought the green one, because Atreides colors are the exact same as Loki colors, which I'm gonna be curious how many people take me as another Loki original design. Cause I've already done one of those, but yeah, Atreides colors are just Loki colors. Green, black, and gold. Well, gold is the accent for fancy things. This is the armor fabric. Now you'll notice that it's very flimsy, because it's not actually the armor structure. Armor structure, what I do with armor structures is I use stiff interfacing. Why do I use stiff interfacing? Because it bends. It's not foam. It doesn't crack when it bends, because you didn't paint it. So this is going to be for the belt, sort of like a hip pad type belt, and then the actual armor, so I can sit in it, is the more flimsy version. So these are my solutions to the concept of being able to sit down and making armor that feels good. Now, the second thing is, throughout the entire project, I bought 1 yard of this gold, this like really cool silk. This is the accent color for all the little tubing and everything going across the arms. The next thing is the lining for the coat. I have 8 yards here. I don't actually need 8 yards. I only really needed 6. But I have 8 yards here of this really gorgeous matte satin, and it just all fell down behind me. Matte satin. It really kind of matches that color. This is the inside lining, and I really enjoy this fabric for no reason other than it's heavy, it's chunky, it's nice, and it really will add a lot of body to the inside coat. The inside coat, like the long fancy robe with the hood, cotton sateen. Like, cotton sateen was one of my favorite fabrics ever, because it has a shine, but it's also cotton, so it has a really nice body. But like, yeah, so I'm using cotton sateen for a lot of linings. So I have 2 yards here for linings. I've got an extra 2 yards for sleeves, for a hood, because it needs a hood. And then the outer coat will just be really nicely embroidered with like sand dunes and couching and like a sandworm, probably, because Dune and Shai Hulud, right? So yeah, 2 yards of cotton sateen, but I also have the other 8 yards sitting over there cut up. So another of the winners is this absolutely gorgeous dotted silk taffeta that I bought. It has little micro dots, but it really reminds me of the textures in still suits, so I wanted to use it to create this really nice texture in like the big fancy still suit. So I have that. So this is just gonna be for the like the outer arms, the leg covers, or stuff like that, just for like the fancy little extra bits. Fancy knee pads. So the last thing is I have leftovers from Thranduil, and I don't know what to do with this. So part of this is probably to become fancy knee pads, because I mean I do have like but I really only have like this much left. And there's not much you can do with it other than like accents at this point, which is what I usually use brocades for after I use a whole bunch of it. Fancy knee pads, fancy elbow pads, fancy pads of all sorts, because if you don't know, still suits have catch pads. So yeah, that's that. And we have, well, we'll see where we end up, but I've started work, and whenever I like do work on this, I'll probably film it, but it's going to probably be over the course of the next 6 months, because I have, before this, ventilating 2 lace front wigs, 1 for practice, 1 for Crown Championships, finishing King Thranduil, making a giant staff that glows. Senator Anakin needs updates. He has a deadline in April, so I need to make a new coat, which will probably take like 2-3 weeks, because it's going to be really embroidered and fancy. And if you don't know me, I specialize in beading and embroidery, and I do competitive cosplay, meaning that these are all deadlines for competitions. My first deadline is in January, and then February, and then whenever Crown Championship applications are, available, then that's my deadline, probably in early March or late February. And after that, we also have deadlines for April, which is another application. And then, during this time, I'll be working on this. Don't worry. I've got so many things. But that's my next project, my big next project, but I will be filming other projects and updates, and you will watch me learn how to ventilate a wig as well. So I get to take a little bit of time to work on this project in between other projects. I've got about 4 days before, things will start arriving again for my ventilation of lace front wigs. I started doing some work on the coat, so I have all the panels sewn up, and I started doing the embroidery. But I'm going to sort of talk about the embroidery itself, and the embroidery itself is mostly going to be outlined. It's not going to be any satin stitching, any filling in. Very important, mainly because I wanted it to look like the sandworm mural that we see in Dune 2021, right, the new Dune version. I want to talk about the materials I'm using. So I have 2 of these gigantic spools, right? So 2 of these spools will be a very important part. Yep, here's the other one. So I got 2 of these. I have approximately over 200 yards of gold metallic threads in just different colors, like different sizes. I have this obviously pretty shredded jewelry thread. Beeswax will be very important, I promise. And I bought like a whole bunch of these, and I have some silver, and then I'm going to be using, right, so very important for this is beeswax, but I'm going to be using this as couching thread. So couching is whip stitching over a piece of cord to give it a shape, mainly because I have almost 80 inches of fabric to embroider in the front and in the back and on the sleeves and on the hood. Like, there's a lot to do, and actually filling that stuff in would take me a year top, like very much, but there's going to be a lot of just like outlining, and so I decided couching is the best way to do this. I'm just waving this around, but yeah, sort of that. All my materials are just different versions of gold metallic thread in different So the first thing I did on this thing was lay down and couch a cord. So I'm couching one of the thicker cords, one of the gold cords that are meant for gold work, just to make sure that I've got a really nice, good outline started on this thing. So I finished couching all of the sandworm, and I added bullion cord on the edge. I created all of these little pieces. This is 2 layers of cord, and this is bullion cord. I've started shading it with this this reflective metallic thread, and I'm going to shade it also with this machine embroidery thread, partly to use it because I bought it like 3 years ago thinking I was going to use it, never used it, so now I'm using it. Yeah, and then perhaps we're going to add some of this stuff. Like I said, I've got about 250 yards of gold embroidery thread specifically, like no other color, just gold. But sandworm. And then obviously after that, we'll be using silver, we'll be using beads and stuff to create the mouth. But for now, I need to do the gold work because the rest of this thing is all covered in gold sand dunes. It's inspired by the mural, which is the second time I've embroidered the sandworm on a costume, because the first time I said it to Anakin. But that mural in Dune 2021 just has my heart. And then for shading on this stuff, I actually used this really cool reflective metallic thread. And I just went through with satin stitches kind of out and just shaded the worm, kind of where shadows would hit. So if there's a curve, that's where I really wanted to shade it. And then it would switch once the curve switched on the worm. So, I am exhausted, but we are actually back from C2E2 now, and that means that we are back. So also that means that it is, what, April? I think I predicted April would be the month that I get this started again. I don't remember. I said something at the beginning of the video, and it's been like 4 months since then. I started that in December. We are back now. I am working on the coat. I'm embroidering the back of the coat still. I'm doing some bottom stuff. I designed some new stuff. I did some redesigns, did some new designs. I have changed a lot of what I originally planned. But for the better. There's a lot of other stuff. So this is probably going to be something that I spend a little bit of time on. I don't want it to be a crazy, heavily detailed build. I don't need it to be. I've got a bigger thing planned for immediately afterwards. So let's just, do the thing, see how far it takes, see what I do. We're back. Okay, so I left this in. This got completely wrecked and didn't actually use it, but I left this in for the sake of, this is how original designs kind of work. So I started beating an Atreides hawk, and I got really, really far on it, and it looked kind of ugly. So then, after a while, I unpicked it again, and it was a very good decision to leave the outer robe with simplicity. Sometimes simplicity is the best thing you can do when you're designing a costume. So I had started all that beating yesterday at 1 p.m. And then this morning I finished half of it, and I was like, no. And so I unpicked half of it, all of it, and now I'm just couching gold lines. And why did I do that? I don't know, because I thought it needed beading. I don't think it needs beading. I'm going to probably do a little bit of embroidery on the sleeves, but no, it's all just getting couching. So now we're back to couching. In the end, I decided to go with line work, and so I just couched down the entire robe. Now, people like to get on me for not using hoops, but when I do couching, I find hoops just inhibit me. When I do actual embroidery, yeah, I use hoops, but for this, I don't find it necessary, which you can roast me if you want, but again, it's not crazy necessary sometimes. Hello and welcome. It is warm outside. I have just completed couching and finishing both sleeves. I'm going to go over what I did, just because it's more couching. I didn't really film it because you've already watched me couch like 50 things. But after this, I get to start cutting out the lining. This has been sitting unfinished in a box for like months. I'm so excited to cut out a lining for this coat. It's been the green fabric that I have hoarded for so long gets to be used. I'm so happy. Oh my god. So yeah, I'm gonna show you what I did at the couching, and then I'm gonna go cut out a lining. So these are currently sitting on the floor. I apologize if it's like kind of appalling, but yeah, so I finished couching all of these. I have all the bullion stitches, the Atreides hawks. The sleeves are just very long. They're not meant to be the craziest of detailed things, because that's what the back and the front are for. The front I have a really cool idea with. I just have to construct the entire garment, which is why the lining has to be cut out. Hi, my worm is still in worm quarantine from last con, by the way. But yeah, bullion stitches, and there's just like couching lines going all the way down. This is like, yeah, like I said, the sleeves are the least detailed part. And I think that's completely fine. So yeah, we're going to cut out linings for these things now. The green is what's going to be on the inside, and I think that's going to be really striking, is to have only gold and black on the outside and the green on the inside. Once everything was embroidered and ready to go, and I actually put hot glue on the entire back of everything, all the knots, just to make sure that the knots would stay in place, I sewed up, I got the lining done, and at this point it was too heavy to sew the actual lining under the machine after the sleeves, but here we are. Hi, I'm currently embroidering things on the front. I'm doing the Fear is the Mind Killer speech on a, sort of like a rune, like Fremen language thing, and I have found that there are a lot of questionable letters in the Fremen language that just look mildly phallic. It's actually hilarious. So I'm masking them a little bit, just because, I don't know, it feels weird. But yeah, fun fact. It's kind of cool. It's really tedious, but we're almost done with the coat. I constructed it last night. I didn't really film. I filmed a little bit of it. It was just more sewing side seams and sewing sleeves together. Yeah. Hello. I found a mic somewhere, so I don't know if it's working, but I'm going to try it. Hi. So, we are currently understitching the lining that I just hand-felled. It's taking forever, but once the understitching is done, I'm done. I'm done with the lining, which means the jacket, the long robe, the very long embroidered robe is done, which means I can move on to the really fun fiddly bits of the still suit, of the under parts of the still suit, of the over parts of the still suit, a pair of leggings, some pairs of boots, and a really weird headdress. I'm really excited to try the headdress, but that's going to come last. We'll see what we get done, because I'm also currently hand tying a wig again. So, I have finished the coat. The coat's going to get its own little reveal, but I'm now drafting pants patterns for the under leggings, which I started, and then I just hate it. So I'm going to make these a little different, I think, and I think that's going to hopefully work out better than what originally happened, because the other ones were just so deeply uncomfortable that there was no way I was going to wear them. All right, drafting pants without any patterns at all. So I know my measurements really, really well. So when I draft pants, I genuinely just use chalk and a measuring tape. So the first thing I'm doing here is tracing out the inseam of the pant. So the crotch piece of the pant, I kind of know where those need to lay, how high it needs to be, and then you have your waist measure, but divided by 4 because you got the 4 parts of the pants. So then you have to, divide that, mark that up, and then how long you want the pants, right? So you have to make sure you know exactly the length, and then figure out sort of the smallest point, and then sort of the bigger points, right? And then you have to connect the two. So it's basically, in a way, tapering down a lot. Now, this doesn't have to be very accurate. I have a very
not strategic way of making pants, because what I usually do is I cut out not a square, but something that's kind of close to my measurements, and then what will happen is I take pins. I literally pin the pant leg to like my underwear or something, and then I will pin it to myself. Basically, I will legitimately just pin myself into the pant, take it out, and translate that instead, because I don't know, man, it's really accurate to just pin on yourself. Pattern drafting who? I don't know, not me. Oops. And make sure the knee tapers in, because that's something that will kill a pair of pants if the knee isn't tapered in properly.
So I'm currently sitting on the floor. I just drafted up the front of a pants pattern using measurements that I know that I have. And I just measured different circumferences and I connected the joints, right? So I did waist, I did 1/4, and then I did inseam, and then pants like thigh, knee, and ankle. And that's how I do my pants. I don't think I've used a pattern in like forever. I have one pants pattern that fits me, but I can't find it, so drafting. Because it's a pair of leggings, it's gonna fit. This isn't the most aesthetically pleasing image right now, but I want to sort of talk about what I'm trying to do here, and it's gonna be a funky little complicated piece. So, okay, what do we have, right? So what we've got here, right, is we've got ribbed silk. So this is really cool, like micro dotted silk taffeta. You can hear it, right? From Silk Baron, and then I have a base layer here of cotton sateen that I've created sort of like these cording pieces and everything. What's going to happen is I'm going to cut these things out of the silk taffeta with no seam line. So the only seam line you're going to get is the crotch seam, right? And I'm going to try and like cut them out and then like hem them and get them slip stitched on here so that you don't see any of the lines, because that's kind of, I think, that's the only way I can think that they did it in the original Dune movie with the still suits, because there's like no seam lines and they're all cut out and it's really cool, and like it made no sense to me, but now I think it makes sense, and I'm gonna try it this way. So if I ruin silk taffeta, I'm gonna be sad, but we're gonna try. So quite a lot has happened. Quite a lot of frustrating stuff, right? So I do have the pant covers already completely finished, though they did not turn out as amazing as they could have been because a lot of stuff went wrong. But they're done and they look fine, and they really only have to look fine from the top. It's about the knee. This bottom part really doesn't matter at all, so because they're gonna get boots. So the last thing that I have to do for this is figure out the cutouts for the knee pads and then figure out what I'm doing for the knee pads, but I'm gonna move on. We're making the crotch pieces. So if you don't know, a still suit has crotch pieces. So I've completed the pants except for the knee pad. I think we're gonna do some embroidery in the knee pads. I'll talk to you about them when I get them in a somewhat state of understanding. The pants, I didn't film a lot of the actual construction because it was a nightmare, right? It was just a lot. I'll do a retrospective where I just talk about them in a bit, but I'm gonna make the arm, socks, sleeves, garters, whatever now, so I'm gonna talk about those a little bit more. So this is the cotton sateen base. I'm going to sew up the side seam, and then I'm going to, with chalk, trace out designs. Now, these are a little different because a lot of the designs go on the seam here. But I'm not going to cut out the outer layer of silk yet, because what's going to happen is that all of the designs get done as like insert panels. They get inserted, and then I have to in some way hide the fact that I'm sewing over top of them with the other piece. So we're using slip stitches again. So we're gonna see what I come up with here, see how I create the sleeve, but I think it'll be really interesting. And then the sleeve is gonna get an elbow pad as well, because of course still suits have elbow pads and all these, it's just wild. The still suit does have a pleat, has a really interesting like pleat thing, but I don't know if I'm going to add the pleats or not, because I'm basing this slightly off of a 2021 still suit, but not really.
All of the cording, all of the quilted pieces were just sewn on by machine, and then I zigzagged the edges to make sure that it, didn't fray out.
So this is horrible lighting, but this kind of shows what I'm trying to do. So basically what I have right now is the under layer of the arm, like garter, whatever, like arm cover, right? I have everything stitched onto this under layer,
And so what's going to happen is once I get the second one done, I'm going to cut out the over layer of silk taffeta, and that's going to go over, and then I'm going to cut away and just stitch really, really tiny slip stitches over all these things so that they show up, but they're like underneath. I'll film it, but yeah, that's how I did the pants too. So I have just cut out the silk taffeta that goes on the outside of this piece. I have 2 layers. Now I cut this out like this so that there's not a seam going down the middle, because that's exactly why I'm doing this, so that it's seamless on the outside, but the seam is on the inside because of the way the pattern is. It's a whole thing. But yeah, so seamless on the outside. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to stitch wrong sides, I think, together so that this flips over. And then I have to mark and find each one of these pieces and slip stitch. The next thing that happened was I slip stitched everything. So I cut open little holes, little openings in the pieces, and then I slip stitched the silk and the layers together, making sure to hide the zigzag stitching and the stitching that you see to keep it on there. Because what's going to happen is that this gets turned in and then you don't see the stitching anymore. Hi, so I finished a lot of stuff today, or yesterday. I made the arm socks. Please ignore the mess in the back. You're currently looking at my scrap pile. But I finished the arm pieces. Now, I started working on elbow pads, and nothing has ever stuck. So at the moment, I'm still going to work on the embroidered ones for the knee pads, and then really just not do elbow pads because they just got really convoluted. But since I'm kind of doing that on the side, I decided to start working on the belt and the first part of the cod piece. You're like, cod piece? Yes. Still suits have cod pieces. So I've made a belt, which will also be the attachment point for a lot of stuff, so I have it in the back. This is going to be a gold leather applique that I'm going to couch, and then the rest of it's going to be done in green and in silk and then in black. Might also be green. We'll see what colors come up. But yeah, it's really just there as a piece. So this costume is basically just kind of an experiment in me trying to do weird stuff. And because, you know, Dune sci-fi stuff. So I'm really, really trying to make it look weird. I don't want it to look normal, hence why I am making a cod piece, but like, you know, still suits have cod pieces. So my goal is to not make it look like a normal costume, not make it look like something you could buy now or wear now or in anything. So yeah, here we are. Let's get to some belt, some cording, and some parachute buckles. Oh, I need to buy more parachute buckles. I have to buy more parachute buckles. Okay, so I'm currently doing the cod piece here. So this is getting bias tape. I might get something in the middle, but also this is just the base of the cod piece. There's going to be another piece over top of it. I'm also doing the hip pads. These are going to get couching like I did my boots for Thranduil. This is just gold leather, and then this is the hip padding, and then this will attach to the pieces of cording. So I've got parts of the belt sort of pinned. I have the cording pieces, I have the cod piece, and I have the back piece. But I want to add sort of like an extra belt. So something on the actual still suit is they've got like an actual piece of like cording running through here and here and here. And they've got these, here, there's actually a little tab for a piece of, there's actually a little tab for straps or buckles. And I have, for my first still suit, these buckles that I bought. And I could very well sew one in the back of here, connect a little tube, and that would hide the weirdness going on here and also give me an opportunity to make something kind of weirdly decorated. So I spray painted 2 of these gold, and I think that's what I'm going to do. Holy crap, hi. It's been like 2 weeks since I last did anything on this thing. So I was getting some stuff done for a convention. Obviously, I've been to that convention, if you can't tell by my voice. I also did like a whole show and everything. It's been a weekend, so I'm very tired. But we have made progress today, and you're like, what progress? I have finished the cod piece and the belt with the strappies. Now, this is something that if you've seen the Dune 2021 and the still suits, you know that there's like the hip pads and then the like straps and the little like corded pieces. I just remade that in the green again. Like I said, this is mostly just a still suit, but fancy. So this is the lovely cod piece. These are straps. I spray painted these gold. This is all this. There's buttonhole stitching, elastic with parachutes. This is cording, right? So it's all pretty just fun, funky stuff with couch leather. It's pretty simple. I didn't want it to be super complicated, but you know, This is going to get elastic at the very end so I can figure out where the cod piece really wants to be. Because it needs to somehow elasticize and rotate and not look weird, but okay. So now it's time to do the, like, chest armor. So this is going to be a fun layering experience for me. I know the back is going to be parachute buckled again, so that's going to be fun, but I'm very excited to figure out all of the weirdness. And then come the tubes. I'm so excited for this. So just like the crotch piece, just like the leg pieces, I just pulled really thick cord through the middle of this thing, and let me tell you, cording on a curve kinda sucks. It's kind of really, really hard. Okay, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm gonna talk to you about kind of what I'm doing. Hopefully it makes sense. It probably doesn't make sense, because I actually don't know what I'm doing. So I've currently got like an underlayer of cording, and then this is like the under structure of the armor. I have felt that I'm using for the actual like understructure for the jacquard part. I've cut out the jacquard, which is terrifying. And I've gotten all this done. I've gotten all pinned on. This is gonna be the lining. And what's gonna happen is I'm probably gonna treat it like I did the sleeves, where you've got the inside pieces and I fold under and I stitch here on the outside pieces, which is the felt and the jacquard. And then we do another layer of this. So we're gonna hopefully this works. So I don't really know exactly where I left off, but armor is being made. I have the whole base layer down. Now, this was such a nightmare that I just let myself do the thing and let you not hear the yelling of trying to figure this whole thing out. But we now have a base layer of armor. Now, I'm really sad because the jacquard fabric that I wanted to use originally for both layers is only for the bottom layer, because it just isn't like the super right color for the rest of it. So the top layer is for the rest of the silk, and I'm using the last of that really gorgeous, like, green yellow silk, which is a lot brighter. But you have to build the top layer. Now, this is really complicated because I'm trying to do it without showing any seams, so I have to slip stitch the top layer. The bottom layer I could add bias tape, but I don't think I want to add that for the top layer, and I really do want to slip stitch it. I'm using felt. It's really weird. To close these pieces, to close the felt pieces and the backing, I just slip stitch them kind of big, because what's going to happen is that the bias tape goes over top of these. So I do want to edge it, and so I just kind of made sure that it would stay together with like whip stitching. And then I stitched down the bias tape, because I did bias tape, have to whip stitch down the back, and it was not the cleanest back job, but you know what? It's the back, it's the inside. No one has to see that, right? Hey, what's up? I am the literal worst at filming right now, because I just did a literal crap ton of work and just barely documented any of it, and I apologize. Because I've gotten the entire chest armor done. It's attached, basically, like, it has attachments in the back, it's got its parachute buckle, it's got everything. I started beating it because it needed something, and so we're now beating chest armor, and I didn't film half of it, so I'm going to tell you what's going on. How this all, came to be and exists. Sorry for not filming. I think it's because it was turning into something I didn't like, and when I start not liking a thing, I stop filming it, because then suddenly I have to fix it. It's fun. Yay. So, yeah. So I'm not sure if we got to the bias taping of the armor yet, but we've got it attached at certain small spots with, like, the world's most minuscule stitches. I'm beating the front using black and gold and maybe a little bit of green, just because the front was really plain and it just needed something there. And so we have some beating, and yeah, the underlayer is there. The back has parachute buckles. It's just like elastic. This is what we've got. Now, these are actually two different pieces, right? Which is really cool. So with the beading, I went with architecture, and I just added bugles with line of seed beads. So let's talk about boots and boot covers for about 5 seconds, because I'm not good at these. I'm about to venture into this territory of I don't know what I'm doing. We're going to try some stuff. It worked with Loki, so we're going to try again. I don't know if it's going to work. Usually, for big pieces, I just modify boots, but I have not had the time to go out to Goodwill and buy a $6, no, they're $9 now, a $10 pair of boots for some reason. So we have to do the boot cover thing, because the great thing about still suits, they have boot covers. I love when boots have boot covers, because that makes me not have to buy another pair of boots. I've said the word boots a lot. So I'm going to talk about quickly what I have accomplished in the late wee hours of 11 p.m. last night. So,
I patterned out something with a giant dart. Why the dart? Because otherwise it just would not fit. So I have just like a giant triangle cut out. The inner layer is going to be this textured jacquard that I found at Joann's that was originally going to be for the pauldrons, which I'm actually not going to do now because I don't think the costume needs pauldrons. It might need pauldrons, but I don't want to have pauldrons now. It's kind of pretty. So we've got 4 layers of this. I'm going to layer with that. I might make piping. I might not. I think I'm going to make piping. So I'm gonna make piping. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna have some fun. It's gonna be weird. I don't know what I'm doing, and it's gonna lace up, meaning that I have to make eyelets. I hate making eyelets. I really do. And my life hack for all these is lace up elastic. So using elastic thread to lace up all of your like back boot covers so that you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to use things. You can just shove them up there and then shove them down. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now. We're gonna get to it.
Alright, so the first thing I did was I made some piping out of jacquard that I just never used. Now I have an extra yard of jacquard for no reason. And I used a piping foot. I used some regular sort of macrame cord, I think it was called, just like cotton cording that I use for all the cording and couching stuff. Piping was then basted to the actual piece for the leg, onto the felt and onto the brocade backwards, and that's just basted on to hold it in place because I've noticed that piping likes to slip and slide everywhere, especially on curves. And then I did right sides together, kind of feeling where the piping was so that I could get a really nice looking edge. Because piping, if you don't really get right up to the cord, can look kind of funky.
Okay, so, hi, boots have progress. I have boot covers. These are the base layer boot covers. They're nice structured, and they have elastic in the back so that they can, go up my calves, and I don't have to do zippers, I don't have to do anything, and they are adjustable. The boots that I'm using as the base are my big goth boots, of course, because Paul Atreides, behind all of his everything, is just another goth emo boy, right? So now we're doing the second half, and I'm trying some stump work embroidery. I got some felt laid out in a hawk pattern because, again, hawks and Atreides, and I'm going to try doing some stump work where I embroider over to give it like a really good raised effect. I don't have any bullion cord, so it's all going to be done in beads and in thread because your boy neglected to order bullion cord for this project, so here we are. But I think it's going to be interesting. I'm curious.
Yeah, so the boot covers got done, but that was an experience, and eventually I decided that pauldrons were actually going to be a thing, and so I looked up some architecture stuff, did some foam work, did some patterning, did some draping. Totally didn't film any of it because I am responsible, right? Joking. Bad. But now we are doing the thing where I texturize them, and this is inspired by architecture that I saw from Dune Messiah artwork. And I'm using foam clay and a leather molder, and I'm just making it look kind of gross and veiny. That was the exact whole point of this thing, was it looked really gross and veiny in the thing, but it also was really artfully gross and veiny, so that was the goal. Alright, so the base layers of paint were Muad'Dib and a layer of gold spray paint. And so what I'm doing now is I'm using a mixture of metallics, of color shiftings, of what's called extreme sheens, and a whole bunch of like weird paints to like give this like strange effect. The thing that really struck me about that art piece is the color scheme. So I wanted to make it not bold, but like weird. And so I start with base layers of this color shifting green paint. Alright, and then for weathering, I just did washes of black. I used a piece of scrap cotton gauze to like wipe it off. I like using my finger to blend, or like gauze or something to blend. I don't like blending in the right way. I like blending in the weird ways. So I usually use either fabric or my finger. and this just goes on forever. Let me tell you, this paint job, I think the first one took 3 hours because I was figuring it out, and the second one took about 1.5 hours, and then I also painted knee pads that I just never used. So I've been super neglectful recently just because I got really distracted, but also I did not know what I was doing for the headdress for a very long time. But I finally kind of figured it out. It's gonna be one of those beaded Warbler ones. I finally got new Warbler. Kind of like Lady Jessica's headdress in the first movie where it's got draping, and this one goes right where the eye is, and then this one here as well, and then it'll drape further down. And it'll just be one of those really dramatic like drape pieces, and what I'm gonna do with the Warbler later is cover all this up with some extra side bits. We'll figure it out. It's dramatic, it's weird, it's Dune, it's camp. But yeah, you'll also notice that these ombre I've just been beating a lot. I just did not want to, I don't know, I just didn't feel like filming all the weird failures that I did, so we have something. Basically, I string beads and I connect them. So when I string beads, when I do sort of these crowns, I mostly use what is called like invisible elastic thread or just invisible thread. It's a lot stronger than regular thread, so if you don't be afraid of breaking it. And I will literally just string bead after bead after bead. Every once in a while, double knotting them so they don't like come apart or slide or slip everywhere. And it just goes into different patterns, right? So this is me just kind of going in a pattern using big beads, small beads, chunky beads, plastic beads. I used all of the like random findings that I have, everywhere, because I've got a lot of scrap beads, especially from the headdress from Senator Anakin Skywalker. So my goal is to use some of those. Okay, listen, I promise things are getting done because I am almost done with the crown. But, so what was it, like 4 days ago, Sleep Token released a new record, and I don't think I've hyper fixated on something so hard. Oh god, since like Senator Anakin, or maybe last year's Marvel phase, which is really embarrassing, but also like, at least it's music and not like a TV show or something, though come August, I'm gonna be insufferable for about 3 days when Heartstopper comes out, but oh my goodness, am I completely incapable of existing right now. If you can't tell by the beanie, I did indeed pre-order stuff. I'm trash, I'm sorry. Just had to be said. I'm hyperfixating right now, and it's fine, but also it's inhibiting me getting stuff done sometimes, which is fine. We're almost done. Though I did buy new silk to make a new belt, because the old belt just wasn't cutting it. It didn't look right compared to the armor. So we have more of that silk. There's going to be some more really fun stuff coming. So way too much time has passed again, and I decided to remake the entire belt. So now we're remaking the entire belt. I started working on Thranduil's new update robe because that's technically my closer deadline, so this is going to be fun. But we're speedrunning a belt. Hopefully it'll be done in the next 2 days. I'm so close. The headdress is done. It's painted. I've beaded it. Oh my god. The only thing that's left, I guess, is making the gloves and figuring out a way to attach the crisp knife to my body. So I've been the absolute worst at filming this belt just because I really just want this done at this point. I've been working on this costume somehow for 2 months. Wasn't supposed to take this long. But we have the belt. I'm going to bias tape it in just a second. It's basically the same as the outer piece. It's done with felt and cording on the inside, and then bias tape on the outside. I'm going to cover the edges in beads and probably connect them in some way. There's still a question on if I'm adding boning or not. I don't know. Part of me really wants to add boning on this part, but we'll see. Maybe that's important. So we'll see how I do that without, obviously. So I did end up boning it. I was having a real fun time boning it because the bones that I used were the really cheap plastic ones that you can get at Joann's because, hey, wasn't supposed to bone this. Didn't actually expect it to use anything. So here's me struggling to bone it. And yeah, this was a fun experience. I'm joking. It really was not because also I used the gold bias tape, the lame bias tape. Bad idea. bad idea. That stuff does not stay. That stuff shreds so bad. But in the end, the boning looked really nice, and now I have the back laced up too, so I put eyelets in. So it could be a corset that you can wear in your everyday life, and it's actually a really nice looking thing. And then I just spent some time beating the kind of ugly bits of the boning, because you're supposed to technically put the binding on afterwards to hide it, but I did not, because, oops. And yeah, this was like the last big thing I did. The next thing I did was just sew on a bunch of snaps, get some magnets started, get the attachments started, some Velcro. And that was the end, was all the attachments. Because with that, we are done. Now, if we're done for real, is a question mark, because I am usually never done with my projects. But for now, we are indeed finished, which is actually wild to think about. I had no idea this was going to happen today, right? I think I'm done. Question mark. One, this is really hot. So I think to wrap up real quick, I made the mistake of buying mostly silk, and I love it. It's amazing. It's so cool, but like, it's hot. I'm sweating ass balls because everything is silk. Two, I am now going to move on to Thranduil. So this costume is officially finished. Started in December. Probably looking at around 200 hours of work, which isn't surprising for something like this. And I'm very excited to move on into a different territory. Yeah. So if you want to see me make another Thranduil robe, a new one, a better one with tailoring and everything, please be my guest, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I'm going to try and upload more. This costume just took a little longer than I expected it to take. So yeah. Emperor Paul Atreides. Last of my original designs for a while. The rest of the next few are going to be mostly recreations, but those are still fun. Goodbye.